Okay, welcome to Universal God Message of Peace. And last week, we decided we were going to talk about joy and sorrow. And what happened is I kept talking about trying to find the wisdom and joy, looking at every situation and finding the good in every situation. And that one over there, Lale and Tuncer, she kept saying, but wait a second, there's a wisdom in feeling the sadness, there's a wisdom in feeling the sorrow of situations. And as we find ourselves in the world today, of course, there's plenty, anybody who opens up anybody opens up their social media feed, or pays attention to the world at all is going to see that there is plenty of stuff to worry about. And so we're going to take sides today. So I'm going to take the side of trying to show you that there is a wisdom and goodness even in the negative things that we see. And Lale is going to try to.
I'm going to try to, so be on this, make excuses for our sorrow and try to reveal the wisdom of sorrow and experiencing sorrow and allowing ourselves to experience sorrow.
Okay.
Mhm.
So who's going to go first? We should flip a coin, except I don't have a coin because nobody uses coins anymore. Hold
You
on.
can, you
Hold on.
can go.
Heads, I win. Okay.
You go first.
Okay. I flipped the imaginary coin and I won. Okay. So if we believe that we live in a world that's run by a good God, then at some level we have to believe that in spite of what we see with our own eyes, that everything has to be for the good. So that means that my job is to try to find the good in every situation. Now, you might say, reasonably, how can you possibly find good in people starving? How can you possibly find good in people dying? How can you find good in people being oppressed? And again, there are so many situations in the world right now where that's happening. Um, some of which we're aware of, and many of which we're not aware of. And people feel insecure. All these things. How can you possibly say? So my brief argument is that we don't see a very big picture. We only see from our vantage point as being the puny little human beings that we are, the puny little creatures that we are. We don't see the great expanse of history. We just see the little tiny piece of our lifetime. We only see a little tiny piece of the world. And if we could see the bigger picture, then we would see that somehow or another it all fits together. So, or at least we could trust that it all fits together. Maybe we can't see it, right? If we could see it, that would be great. Then we wouldn't have the challenge. But the challenge we have is what we're seeing as something so negative, but we have to trust that inside of that, there's something positive that we can't see.
Beautiful. Yes. But how many of us can actually see the whole picture? And why did God create us in a way that we can't often see the bigger picture if he didn't expect or want us to experience sorrow because we don't see the bigger picture? Does that make sense? So, why would God allow sorrow to exist if it didn't have a purpose? So everything, my understanding is that exists is there, it has a higher purpose. So there must be a higher purpose for sorrow. And so my understanding from my own experience of sorrow is that often when I feel down, it is because of, often because of pain and suffering, either of myself or my loved ones, or people on the other side of the world. And what I try to do with this is actually it does help me to have empathy for these people, and that empathy I can then can help me uh to push me in the ways of justice and charity and trying to relieve that suffering. And actually that sorrow fuels the that push, that empathy. It's the empathy comes from the sorrow from that experience, and it helps me to be more sincere when I'm praying for people who are suffering. And I believe that sorrow pleases God when we use it to pray for other people. There we go.
Okay. So like all good debaters, I'm going to concede part of your,
Mhm,
okay, I'll concede part of your point. So I think you're right that sorrow, like all pain, like all pain. And I'll just add one interesting thing I heard recently, um, that they decided to try to treat um, there are various drugs they use for treating social anxiety.
mhm,
And somebody came up with the brilliant idea of using aspirin to treat. So they found that people who were taking aspirin experienced less social anxieties. They started using aspirin to treat social anxiety, and it worked, right?
mhm,
It actually worked. In fact, it worked better than most of the drugs they were using to fight social anxiety. So why is that? Well, it's because social anxiety is a kind of pain, right? And that physical pain and emotional pain are related to each other. So physical pain, right, is great in some ways because it does a good job of telling us that something is wrong, right?
yeah.
And right, a physical pain tells us that something's wrong. When my arm hurts, my shoulder hurts, when this hurts, and when that hurts, it tells me that there's some problem in that, and I have the opportunity to now attend to that problem. And if I didn't have the pain, I wouldn't attend to that problem. That's
Mhm,
true. So here, like that, when we feel sorrow, as you're right, it offers the opportunity for empathy. It offers the opportunity for us to take action to help other people. Now, that's as far as I go to that. That's as far as I'm going to go to
mhm,
to to agree. The problem is this. The problem is that once we enter into that feeling, we can become ourselves frozen, right?
mhm,
When we do our best work, like if you let's say you go to a soup kitchen, right? I used to work at a homeless shelter. You go to a homeless shelter and people are dishing out food. The person who's looking and thinking, oh, these poor people, these poor people, these poor people, these poor people, right? Is dishing out the food. Oh, these poor people, these poor people. That person is unable to really do well for these people, right? Because their heart is so heavy, and they can barely get themselves to slap the food onto the tray. But the person who's joyful, right?
mhm,
The person who says, listen, I know these people are in bad shape, and I showed up for them. I mean, I showed up with them, and here I am, and I'm going to help them. But is able to do it with joy and energy. Says that person's able to do a much better job and able to do more. The problem with feeling that sorrow is
mhm.
that it can slow us down, right? It can
Very,
even
very
make
good
us
point.
frozen.
Yes, I agree with you there. Definitely, it can prevent us from helping people. But let's ask, why are those people there in the first place to help the 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 hungry, homeless, um, and feed them? It was probably because they felt sorrow and felt sorry for them and felt their pain and suffering, and that's what made them actually want to do it in the first place. Is it not? If we were joyful all the time and we didn't, everything was great, then how would we feel compassion? how would we feel compassion that gets us wanting to go and feed, go and help out and volunteer in places like that?
Right. So, so, so empathy. So
Mhm.
it's interesting. So
How
it's,
can we feel empathy if we don't feel the pain and the suffering ourselves? How can we feel the pain and suffering ourselves? I mean, when feeling pain and suffering and sorrow helps us to empathize with other people who are feeling sorrow because of their pain and suffering, because we've been there ourselves, and that's why we can have compassion on them, and then we can, that can help us be more just, be more charitable, and fuel our passion to help other people. Surely not, but not.
okay, but you're a doctor. Okay, so let's say you're having a really great day. Okay, you're having a really great day. You wake up, you come outside, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, right? The kids have been are well behaved. They're, trundled off to school. Everything is going great. It's amazing, right? And
Mhm.
you go into work, and somebody comes in with some hideous problem, right? They come in with some hideous problem. Are you less able to deal with that to deal with that difficult medical problem because you're in a state of happiness? I mean, if their leg is broken, you don't have to break your leg, right? Or you don't have to
Actually,
hit yourself, or,
no,
or
actually, um, the answer to that question is yes, I am less able to solve it properly if I don't have a little bit of compassion there and be able to show this, unless I fake the compassion. So yeah, some people can be joyful inside and pretend that oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I really feel your pain, and actually they can do that, but that is so so important to be able to come down to that level of the sorrow with your patient, because my experiences as a doctor, the medication we give is it's only a cover up. What really heals people is the compassion, is the taking time to care. So anybody can be a doctor. I've got a medical degree and I'm a doctor, but actually you could be a doctor. I said to some children said, "Oh, I want to be like you and I'm old and I want to be a doctor." I said, "You can be a doctor when your friend is crying or sad about something. Give out, talk to them, listen to them, um, be there with their in their suffering with them, and then you will heal them. That will be a healing." And then you're a doctor because actually compassion is a huge is what heals people, really, I believe. I mean, obviously there's like not all there is a role for, I'm not saying there's not a role for doing what I do. There is, and there is a role for medication. It's very important. And um obviously surgery, if somebody's needs an operation, then I'm not applying it to those.
don't forget to take your medications.
Yes, if your doctor says take your medications, fine, take your medications. And if you need surgery, don't, compassion's not a time for just, if you need to have an emergency operation, then you need to have an emergency operation. I'm not saying that, but often, the sorrow you feel, the pain that you feel because somebody shared a story with you, when the patient picks up on the fact that you you do care and it's affected you, and that you're there with them and you understand them, that is a huge part of the treatment.
So, okay, I'm gonna concede some more. I think maybe I'm losing here, but okay, I'm gonna concede some more. But I'll come back.
Okay.
So there's a lot of talk these days about what's called toxic positivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Toxic positivity. I know that's where people are having problems, right? So imagine somebody comes to you, you know, and they say, "Oh, I've had the worst day, had the worst day. I'm just, and you go, it's all good. Don't you understand, man? It's all good. It's all amazing. And and you don't allow people to have feelings, right? Because you don't allow people to have feelings because you're making them feel bad for having any kind of feelings. And so there
Yeah.
is there is such a thing. There is such a
It's
thing. And
like
I think that
making
that's
somebody, it's like making somebody wrong for feeling pain and suffering. When
right.
we we don't allow people to express that by saying that they should always feel joy and happiness, then it's like um yeah, making it wrong, and that doesn't help somebody.
So
It's not.
we'll skip that. Okay, so we're not gonna do that. Okay, no toxic positivity. How about something like therapeutic negativity, right? The, or therapeutic negativity. So
Yeah.
you can look at you. So if I'm looking at the world and I say, okay, the world is the world is all good. Okay, the world is all good. I'm going to give an extreme example. So I'll talk about my rabbi. My rabbi was a Holocaust survivor, and he worked as a he was in one of the Hungarian labor camps, and he worked as a cook. He worked as
Mm,
a cook, and he used to peel potatoes. He used to peel potatoes, and it was a dirt floor in the kitchen, and he would peel the potatoes, and he would grind the potato peels into the floor so that you couldn't see them, and then he would pick them up later, and he would give them to people who were sick. And he got caught at this, and they cut off his finger. And I
mm,
mean, it was a horrible experience, right? And
mm,
they tried to kill him, and they tried to kill him. They gassed them, but he survived, and he was buried under dead bodies for 3 days. Horrible, horrible experiences. And I once asked him about this time, and I wanted to, to get him to tell me stories and everything else. And he said to me, he says, I saw a lot of miracles. What? I was like, what? You know, and he had this attitude.
mhm,
Um, he carried that attitude with him all the time. But this is the but part.
mhm,
But people used to call him with all their petty problems. Okay.
mhm,
So I used to be in his, we used to study together, and I would be in his office when people used to call him. And this is what it sounded like when people used to call him. They would call, and he would go, uh-huh. Oh, mm, oh, oh, oh. Right? He didn't say anything. Okay. Now, understand, this is a man who was in the Hungarian labor camps. And this is somebody talking about their problems. They have a kid, and the kid is 16 years old, and they stay out a little bit late, and, they stay out a little bit late, and they misbehave. And
mhm,
my wife, she doesn't give my dinner on time, and here's a guy who's been through hell, right? And what is he doing? He's going, oh, now I don't think for a minute,
mhm,
okay, that I don't think for a minute that that these were really big problems for him. Okay. But he made the appropriate noises, and people would comment to me. So I would see these people right later, and they'd go, "Oh, I talked to your rabbi, and he gave me the best advice. He said the most amazing thing. He changed my life." And I was there, and I know he didn't say a word. Okay. All he did was go, "Oh, oh, terrible, terrible." Right?
yeah,
And
it's
so,
amazing how just doing that can really help people.
yes, so I
No.
would say that that therapeutic negativity, can be very powerful. But what's going on inside you, right?
Yes. Yeah, he might be joyful inside, but not flaunting it in front of people who are not joyful.
Right,
It's
right.
like you wouldn't go to a funeral and, start, if people were, didn't want that. Some people's funerals, they do want that, but
Oh, oh,
I think we
oh,
have to respect. I think it's about respect, isn't it? And respecting what the other person expects and wants,
yeah,
and putting your feelings aside, and um
yes.
so if you want to express your joy, sacrificing that in order to allow somebody else to express their sorrow, I guess, is a beautiful thing. However, okay, so coming back, that's a good point. So yes, and I agree with that. But how would we really understand and appreciate joy? There's one thing about being joyful, but there's another thing to appreciate being joyful. How can we truly appreciate anything like joy or, love, kindness, anything that sort of we often describe as positive emotions, if we didn't have the negative side to experience as well? So if we didn't experience sorrow, how would we truly appreciate joy? So perhaps the higher purpose of sorrow is one of them is so that we can better appreciate times of joy and appreciate what gives us true joy. So perhaps our sorrow is there to talk to us, to guide us away from that which causes lasting sorrow, and teaches us what is it can bring us a lasting joy. And if we didn't have the sorrow, then how would we know to reach higher levels of joy?
I'm going to concede that a little bit. I think there's 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 something there's definitely something there. So a little Jewish mysticism. Okay, so in Jewish mysticism, the world is often described as klipat noga. I'll how if I explain this. So imagine that you have an opaque a semi not opaque translucent glass jar. Okay, so it's not see-through. Okay, and it has a light in it, which means you can see the light kind of through the dark glass, right? Through the dark glass. So listen, the world is kind of like that. The world is kind of dark, right? It's kind of dark, but you can see the light in the darkness, right? And you can see the light in the darkness. Now, the darkness is unavoidable, right? Sorrow is unavoidable. The world is full of sorrow, right? I mean, all of us are going to experience sickness, pain, death, the death of the people we love. And now thanks to the wonders of technology, we can experience the death and suffering of everybody all over the world all the time, 24 hours a day, right? Used to be that you only knew what was going on in your neighborhood. Now we know everywhere. So we get to see the suffering of everybody in the world. We get to see the evil of everybody in the world. You get to see, everybody puts their evil thoughts up on TikTok for us all to see. So we have plenty. We don't have. There's no shortage. There's no shortage of the negative. So I'll take it that it is an opportunity. Okay, so let's say that it's an opportunity. But what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to be looking at the darkness and to see the light that illumines within it, right? Is to see. So
if we can see the wisdom within sorrow, then that's like seeing the light, the joy that can help transform the sorrow surely to joy, because then we can experience the sorrow but be joyful at the same time, even though it sounds contradictory. But does that make sense? I think with joy, it's important to separate the temporary joys and pleasures of this worldly life and our, pursuing our bodily desires to a true lasting joy that comes with always remembering our Creator and comes with doing good deeds and, studying His words and being kind and performing acts of loving kindness and charity. So that's that brings like a more of a true lasting joy. But somebody might be having that experience at the same time as feeling physical pain and suffering and a type of temporary sorrow. So I think the same we can do with sorrow. There could be like a temporary sorrow and a more of a lasting sorrow. And perhaps the temporary sorrows are the sorrows of our bodily, pain and suffering and loss and loss of wealth. Like you mentioned, everybody has to go through that. But then there's more of a lasting sorrow, perhaps, which is when we feel disconnected from our creator and when we feel in darkness and we don't see the light and we feel like there's no way out. So perhaps it's important to uh maybe what you're trying to say, that joy is always good, and I'm saying, well, actually there's wisdom in sorrow. Perhaps what I'm trying to say is that there's wisdom in the temporary sorrows,
Mhm.
but we don't want the lasting type of sorrow.
Right.
And
Well, the
what
temporary sorrows can are very good at directing our attention to something which
yeah,
demands attention, right? Just like when our body hurts, or if when we feel lonely, right? When we feel lonely, then that can wake us up to the fact that we need to reach out to people and that we need to make connections with people, and when we feel and when we feel, when we feel depressed, and we feel like we're down, we know that we have to do something to lift ourselves up. Um,
exactly, the temporary sorrows, we come to realize that they're temporary. So that teaches us patience. How would we have patience if we didn't feel loss, if we didn't feel the pain and suffering and loss of life and health and wealth? Like, how would we learn what it is to be patient? How would we learn compassion? How would we learn gratitude? And all of these beautiful, values and virtues that bring us to a lasting joy. So, so that's what I'm trying to
okay,
argue.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense. And I also want to concede. I'm conceding a lot. I don't know. Um, but also I would concede that um a lot of what we call joy is what we call happiness turns out not to be happiness. I always use the same example because it always comes to mind. You know, um, you get a big gigantic cake, right? And you get the cake of your dreams, right? You get the entire. I happen to like cheesecake. Okay, so you get this beautiful cheesecake with the cherries on top and everything else. And the first slice is a joy, and the second slice is a joy. And then but you keep eating. By the time you finish the entire pie, it actually stops being a joy because now you feel sick and bloated and you feel horrible. And so a lot of the things that the things that we call happiness
Mhm.
are happiness for a while until we become addicted to it, until it has its negative effects.
Exactly.
And
And actually, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to lose ourselves in that temporary joys of this life. It might have it's a little bit, my understanding is that the temporary joys of this life are a little bit like medications that doctors prescribe, for example, antidepressants. They do have a role, and sometimes it's a pick me up to get you through the day because you're in survival mode and you actually just need a bit of cake or you just want a bit of cake.
right.
Or if and that's okay. But to be stuck on antidepressants, what are we doing? We're covering up the real, the underlying cause of our physical pain or suffering or depression or anxiety.
Mhm.
Same with many medications, really. And the same with all the temporary enjoyments of this life. So people sometimes overindulge, they get addicted to it, and then they can't get out of that.
Mhm.
But I guess what you're trying to promote is this true lasting joy that comes with being connected to our creator consciously and trying to see the beauty in everything, trying to see the goodness in everything, and trying to have hope and patience and gratitude, even in times of darkness, to be able to see the light, and to be able, because you know that God is with you, and you know that it will come to an end, and that there's wisdom in there, and I guess that's what you're trying to promote. And I agree with that. Yes.
She, so I'm gonna so I'm gonna reveal the big secret now. Okay. So the big secret is I think the big secret is that we're not disagreeing. The big secret is that God's wisdom is to be found. The world is a mixed bag. Okay. It's made of light and darkness. We have day and night, we have life and death, right? And and really God's wisdom is to be found in in all of the creation, all of the things we experience, whether it's the happiness or whether it's the happiness, the sadness. And the reason why I thought that we discussed this in this exercise, thought it was a good idea, is because sometimes we don't realize that even in this world of opposites, that we can find God and we can find godliness and we can find the light in all of our experiences, whether it's experience of joy, whether it's experience of sorrow. And um,
And
so it's
actually,
a good
perhaps,
exercise.
God is everywhere, and even in our sorrow, He's there. However, we might not be aware of it as much when we're feeling down or depressed. We- And yeah, so yeah,
So
I
I
think
feel
that's
like
it's
I think we did a good job. I think we did a good job of revealing that we can that in both of these things, right? You in both of these things you can see a certain level of light. And what we're going to do, so this was our first experimental session. Um, but we're going to continue hopefully to do this to take things that seem to be opposites from one another and show how they really relate to each other and how we can find godliness and goodness and virtue um, in all aspects of the creation and really in all aspects of ourselves. Sound good?
sounds great. I think revealing the oneness within the duality of this world and our experience, by doing this, I think that would be great.
Okay. So thank you guys so much, and we'll be back, and we'll do more.
God willing. Thank you. Shalom.
Hello.